The president's disastrous decision to bomb Iran without authorization is a grave violation of the Constitution and congressional war powers. This is unconstitutional. This is an unambiguous, impeachable offense. These are just several posts by outraged lawmakers from both parties who say Trump's attacks on Iran are a violation of the Constitution and a serious overreach of executive power. At least two GOP lawmakers joining Democrats in condemning the strikes. But many rank-and-file Republican members of Congress are standing by the president and his decision. Now, the question remains, did Trump have the legal authority to launch a military strike against Iran? Joining me now is the Hill's courts and legal reporter and author of the Gavel, Zach Schoenfeld. Zach, let's talk about your latest newsletter in the Gavel. You talk about this question of whether or not these strikes were legal or not. Maybe we should reflect back in history a little bit. Obama conducted strikes against ISIS and in Libya. President Clinton launched this NATO bombing campaign on what was then Yugoslavia without congressional action, without congressional approval in both instances. For those who say Trump's actions were illegal this time, what is the differentiation?
It's not all that different, Drew, and that's why you're seeing Republicans respond to some of these Democratic attacks on the president by pointing out the fact that some of these very same Democrats were quiet back in the Obama administration when he was bombing Libya, as you mentioned, going back to the Clinton administration. But you don't even have to go back that far. Just go back to President Biden when he was bombing the Houthis in Yemen. These types of questions always come up when we see a presidential administration try to unilaterally make strikes or some other sort of military operation against a foreign nation. It gets into these constitutional questions where Congress, of course, has the constitutional authority to declare war. Then the president has his constitutional authority as commander-in-chief. And we've seen both the Trump administration as well as previous administrations try to make the case that this is within their authority because these are limited, targeted operations. That's why you keep seeing the Trump administration use the word precision operation, believing that this is within their constitutional authority despite Congress's prerogative.
What have the courts said about what is the trigger that would require an administration to go to Congress?
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of legal precedent necessarily in some of these cases because we've seen when these historical examples have come up, we've seen the courts really, struggle to find a pathway to get involved. Just go back to the Obama administration, back when those operations were going on against ISIS in the Middle East. We saw an army captain at the time try to sue President Obama to try to stop those operations. But the Clinton-appointed district judge who ruled on that case had said that she couldn't even get into the merits of these constitutional questions, saying that, A, that army captain didn't have legal standing, but that even if he did, it was a political question and it was left for the political branches to decide. Now, there's been no lawsuits filed yet against the Trump administration, but at least, if history is any indication, this is something that's not likely to be resolved by the courts.
Let's talk about the War Powers Resolution. This was passed in 1973 in the wake of Vietnam War as Congress was seeking to take back some authority that had been used by the president. It requires the president to notify Congress within 48 hours of a deploying U.S. forces. How does that play into the argument that's playing out now?
We've seen some Democrats raise concerns in addition to saying they didn't authorize these strikes. They also say, compliant with the War Powers Resolution, that they weren't notified in time in accordance with those statutory principles. Now, the Trump administration rejects that. This came up at that Pentagon press conference on Sunday. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was directly asked about this, and he insisted that the administration had complied with its notification obligations under those war powers laws. Now, he also said that congressional leaders, everyone was briefed directly afterwards, directly after those strikes as the planes were headed back to the states. And that's why you're seeing some of these Democrats raise complaints, and they say they weren't given a heads up ahead of time.
What legal avenues would anyone that wanted to challenge these actions by the Trump administration have? It seems like it'd be pretty difficult to get anything through a Republican-controlled Congress. I guess they could try to impeach him, but again, you have the same issue there. What are the avenues that challengers could try to take?
In terms of the political branches, there does seem to be two pathways ahead of them, and you're seeing both of those play out this week. The first is a War Powers Resolution. There are efforts in both the Senate and the House right now, as you were alluding to at the top, to try to pass these resolutions that would prevent the president from making any more strikes against Iran without explicit congressional authorization. The Senate effort's being led by Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, and over in the House, it's being led by Representative Ro Khanna, a Democrat from California, But as you mentioned, that House version has some Republican support, including from Representative Thomas Massie, a Republican from Kentucky, someone who's been very vocal opposing intervention in Iran. So maybe that'll pass if they can get some more Republican votes. Of course, Democrats are in the minority, so they'll need some Republican help to get across the finish line. But that certainly seems like if anything is going to happen here, that's probably the most plausible pathway, because really the only other option is impeachment. And you do have some Democrats calling for that, like Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but even many Democrats haven't even gone that far. So that seems like a long ways off right now.
Yeah. You also wrote about the January 6th protesters. Two of the protesters that faced charges and were eventually pardoned by President Trump joined in this lawsuit that would push to install a plaque that honors law enforcement who defended the Capitol. Who are these two pardoned defendants? And they actually want this monument to be erected up. So they're basically saying, I don't know, thank you for protecting against us.
Well, not the one that is currently been made and this lawsuit seeks to get to be hung up, because these two defendants, Brian Mock and Cindy Lou Young, who, as you mentioned, were pardoned by the president, they're essentially saying that if this plaque is going up, it's not telling their side of the story. They're calling it one-sided and saying that if maybe a plaque should go up, but it should get in what they believe is their side of the story. So they're bringing up, of course, the fact that Ashley Babbitt, who was shot and killed, one of those rioters in the Capitol near the House chamber at the time, they're saying she should be remembered if any sort of plaque is going up. So really trying to formally intervene and get involved in this lawsuit that was filed by police officers that seeks to get Congress to actually put this plaque up. So still no word if the judge is going to allow these defendants to get involved in the case, but they certainly want to, in their words, tell their side of the story.
That's going to be a long and strangely worded plaque if they have to do that for both sides. I want to ask about another story you've been covering. That is of Kilmar Abrago Garcia. He's back in court today, I believe. He appears in a Nashville courtroom. The Trump administration has been fighting to keep him detained. Could we see him released, and what's the latest on that?
It seems that the magistrate judge who is overseeing his criminal case right now, she has signaled that she is prepared to issue a release order for Abrago Garcia following this hearing that's set to take place later today in Nashville. She issued a ruling the other day saying that the government can't justify detaining him based on these criminal charges that accuse him of smuggling migrants on dozens of trips across the country. But even though she might issue this release order today, as she put it the other day, this is little more than an academic exercise, because even if she says that, okay, he can't be detained on his criminal charges, what would happen next is immigration authorities will simply take him into custody, completely unrelated to his criminal case and just the fact that he isn't in the country lawfully and had entered illegally. The Trump administration is trying to fight this. They've actually warned that if he is not allowed to be detained because of his criminal case and he goes into the hands of immigration authorities, he could end up being deported again before his trial.
So not any prospects of him getting released anytime soon as that works its way through the courts. Any other interesting legal news on your radar?
Well, Drew, we're headed now into the final few days of Supreme Court decision season. We're expecting more opinions tomorrow. The Supreme Court has 10 cases remaining. We're in the home stretch now. But of those 10 cases, there are quite a few that are big cases. We've got a big case on birthright citizenship, another case on LGBTQ books in schools, a big redistricting case. So a lot of big decisions that we're expecting both tomorrow, but probably in the next few days as the justices race to meet their self-imposed deadline of finishing their work by the end of June, which of course is now just a few days away on Monday. So expect a lot of big news out of the Supreme Court over the next few days.
Lots of stuff to continue to follow. People don't even need me to access you. They can head over to thehill.com, follow the Gavel newsletter, and they can get the news right in their inbox.
Thanks, Drew.
All right, have a good one.